Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we have our citizen input, I just want to have everyone please say a prayer today so that Ashley's son, Aaron, may get the call from St. Jude's. I think it's really important. The more people that are praying, the more power we have. And if everyone prays for that, it will be a miracle. So thank you, Ashley, for sharing that.
Thank you.
We have citizen input today. This is a time provided for our citizens to address the board. They will be addressing issues that are not on our agenda, and if they do have any information with them, part of their presentation, that will be asked to be part of our permanent record. So we do have this morning Rondo. Would you like to come up and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Is that cutting into my time?
Yeah, that's enough.
Morning. I just want to ask a couple quick questions. I've also noticed that in the rounds of campaign seasons, a question seems to always be presented during campaign season, but never really seems to move before or after. My questions being is there any movement toward having this commission move to a nonpartisan body and maybe have a 5-member instead of 3-member? Just putting it out there. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Rondo.
Thank you.
Are there any others in the audience that would love to say something today, this morning? Okay, we'll go on then with our consent agenda. Are there any items that you want to pull?
Quite a list of items on the consent agenda today. So, but yeah, nothing I'm proposing to pull.
So for me, that being in Ontario on Monday, I didn't get a chance to, and then meetings yesterday, I didn't get a chance to review the minutes. So I'd like to pull those for today.
Okay, all right, so.
16, 17, and 18.
Okay, so we'll pull items 16, 17, and 18, and I would like to pull item 4 just because I would like a little bit of clarification on that. So
Okay.
is there a motion now?
I'd move that we approve the consent agenda as indicated on the agenda with the exceptions of item 4, 16, 17, and 18.
I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion? Commissioner Henderson?
I vote yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Okay.
So, thank you so much. Yes, item number 4.
So item number 4, I believe, is the budget adjustment for statewide transportation improvement funds. This is a pass-through of dollars that we receive from the state. That the budget adjustment is taking the initial allocation that we received from the state, and we would be passing those dollars through to COIC, who will be executing the STIF projects that the board has reviewed and approved. I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
Okay, my question, when I was looking at the documentation attached, it looks like this transportation charge to all employees is 0.1% now. But it looks like if you look at the schedule for 2023, it's jumping up $1 million. It's jumping up from $3 million in 2020. So what is the percent then going to be jumping up? Is that part of the legislation?
That's not something that I have.
I know, it's
but I can look into it definitely, and I can reach out to our liaison at ODOT to find out more. Are you looking at which attachment?
I'm looking at Deschutes County
the table that shows all county.
Right. It's packet page 79 4B.
Okay, so
And-
that's the projection from the state.
And so when you look at it, yes, for year end 2020, it says $3,049,000. But then when it's for our year 2023, it's over $4 million. So either we're going to have a lot more employees here, or the percentage is jumping up, and I just wasn't aware what is the percentage going to be doing.
Okay, I can definitely look into that with ODOT, and get back to you with a more detailed answer for sure.
Okay.
You know, and what I noticed here, Commissioner Dare, is that the big jump is actually in 2021. It goes up 600,000, and then it goes up about 200,000 in 2022 and
Right.
2023. So it's like there's a big jump there in 2021. So
And one thing, and I'm not sure that this correlates, but there is discussion about combining the STF and the STIF programs, and I'm not sure if that's why that jump is reflected or not. But again, I'll reach out to
Okay.
our contact at ODOT and get back to the board with more information.
I think that would be great,
Okay.
just so we're aware, because it's, what is, it? Our allocation is almost $7.6 million that we're funding, and this says that we've received over 3 million. So, anyway, just trying to keep it all in order. Thank you. Thanks, Whitney.
Thank you.
So I'll move board signature of resolution number 2020-003, budget adjustment for statewide transportation improvement funds.
Is there a second?
And I'll second it.
Any more discussion?
Well, I think it will be interesting to see not only does it grow, what that growth is, but does the percentage change? Because it's a payroll tax on everybody in the state, so. With that, that's all my only comment.
I know, I just wanted more information. Commissioner
That's good.
Henderson?
I vote yes.
Commissioner DeBon?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. Okay. We have our first item on our agenda. Ed Keith?
Good morning, Commissioners. Ed Keith, County Forester. First item I have for you this morning is the consideration of the chair's signature for our intent to award the qualified pool for this calendar year. You may recall from previous years, we use a qualified pool of fuel reduction contractors. And we refresh that pool each year per the county code. And basically the idea behind this pool of contractors is that it helps us expedite smaller projects throughout the year. So we identify the contractors that are interested in doing this broad range of work that includes various items of fuel reduction, including tree thinning, pruning, brush mowing, chipping, slash removal. They can indicate that they're interested in all of those or a portion of them. They submit qualifications to me, past work references, equipment lists, those sorts of things. So I review those and make sure that they're actually in this business and qualified to do the work. Then they're placed in the pool for the year. And then as we have projects that come along, typically in the spring and then again in the fall for fuel reduction within communities, we reach out to those contractors, get specific bids on those projects, and then move forward with contracting those. And so we could do that in a little bit more expedited manner if we have this pool identified, as opposed to kind of broadly advertising every time we have a smaller contract to move forward with. So that's the idea of this qualified pool. Depending on a grant that I'm waiting to come in, I'm anticipating that there may be up to around $300,000 worth of contracts. We are still waiting on a grant that we applied for a little over a year ago now that I'm thinking will come in this calendar year. We do have some funding on hand, though, so we definitely will be using this pool, whether or not that grant comes this calendar year or not. So.
How much is that grant for, Ed?
That grant total is for just shy of $500,000. It's a 3-year grant, so that's why just a portion of it I'm forecasting for this year, and then as we get it awarded, we plan those projects and then implement them.
Are there any other questions?
I have a question. We do this, I think, every year. Are we seeing more people available or less? It seemed like the list used to be longer.
This year, the list is shorter. I have seen it fluctuate, and we really don't necessarily have anybody new on the list this year, although I do hear from people from time to time that are new businesses, and definitely add them to my distribution list. So we direct mail this, we advertise the bulletin and place it on the website so that try to get the word out to people on this. I think it's a reflection of a couple things. One is that my impression is that a lot of these contractors are fairly busy already with contracts outside of what they're doing for the county. So a few of them that have been in the pool for a while decided not to put in this year just due to other contracts and time commitments that they had. And the other is that the ones that I see renewing are the ones that consistently are more competitive in their bidding with the county as well. So I've seen a few drop off that haven't been successful in gaining contracts for probably at least a couple of years, and have decided that they wouldn't put their name forward.
Just real positive, great that we have these pools, these contractors that are out there setting the culture of what does fuel reduction look like, what does the open understory and fire resilient landscape look like. So it's good to have these partners out there.
It's definitely nice to have the workforce. I have talked to people in other places around the country that they're lucky to have one or two contractors to choose from that can do this work. So it's nice to still have a pretty robust list, even though it is a little bit shorter than previous years.
I'd move chair signature of document number 2020-029, notice of intent to award qualified pool of fuel reduction contractors.
And I'll second it.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Henderson?
Vote yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you very much, Ed.
Okay.
It's nice. There are 13 on the list.
Yes. And I would note that everybody that did apply did get in, so we weren't ruling anybody out. So.
Oh, good.
All right, should I move on to the next item?
Yes, you may.
All right, next item is an update to the Greater Sisters Community Wildfire Protection Plan. You may remember that we have several community wildfire protection plans, actually 7 that cover various portions of the county. I try to keep those updated on kind of a 5-year rolling basis. So we move around the county to update kind of the oldest plan. And those updates basically consist of getting the partners together, including those that sign the document. The organizations that sign the document are actually laid out in the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003. Those are the applicable local government, in this case, both the City Sisters and Deschutes County, as well as the fire districts. In this plan, we actually have 3 fire districts included. Those are Black Butte Ranch, Sisters Camp Sherman, and Cloverdale fire districts, as well as the state agency responsible for forest management. So that's the Oregon Department of Forestry, our signatures to the document. We also include the federal partners as well. They're not signatories to the document. We were kind of delivering them the document. The idea of community wildfire protection plans is this is the community informing risks, both on private lands to try to reduce those risks, but also to help prioritize work on the federal lands that surround the community. And we have seen a lot of work on those federal lands, both in the Greater Sisters area and throughout the county. A lot of those are noted in there, so with the update, we've noted some of those projects that are moving forward and are planned to move forward with this update in the next 5 years. Those are noted in the plan, as well as priorities for the next year. That really the overarching priorities don't change a whole lot, which are, protection of life and property, reducing fire risk, creating defensible space, and creating more resilient landscapes on the federal lands. We did try to incorporate the Sisters Country Vision document into there, and so that's referenced at a few different points in this document, as those should speak to each other, because one of the priorities of that Sisters Country Vision was really having a more resilient landscape, more resilient community in the face of natural disasters, wildfire being one that's very important to the Sisters area. Another change that's in here is we have used a new tool to conduct a risk assessment. A risk assessment is essentially kind of a required portion of community wildfire protection plan. Oregon Department of Forestry and Oregon State University came out with a new tool in the last, I guess it's been a year and a half or so now, called the Oregon Wildfire Risk Explorer, where you can essentially use the latest data that's available, and we've used the plan boundary, and then can overlay different data layers to illustrate the risk that's within the plan area. So that's part of Appendix A. That's about halfway through the document. One other thing that I would note.
Was that, when you say it was a new tool, is that a major change in this new plan, is to add all those pages?
I'd say that's a fairly major change, yeah.
It's interesting to look at those, what it all entails.
Yeah, before we used there was kind of a framework that was proposed out there by the Oregon Department of Forestry. When we started writing community wildfire protection plans, we'd been using that framework, but this still utilized a lot of the framework, but really uses the most up-to-date data and they plan to, as new data comes available through, satellite imaging and those sorts of things, keep updating this as a tool. So I think
The one page, packet page 144 that has all the fire ignitions.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, just in what 11 years or something, they had that many
Yes.
human or lightning caused
Yes,
fire.
60% human cause. So we do get our fair share of lightning caused fires, but the human caused fires that can be prevented and should be prevented are quite a significant portion of those fire starts as well. So the one other thing I was going to mention that was kind of something that was quite a lot of discussion, and it's not just been for this plan, but just especially following some of the fires, including the fire in Paradise, was evacuation and evacuation routes and transportation planning. We, in past plans, have kind of addressed that at a very high level or very generally. We did add a map in here to kind of identify some primary, secondary, and tertiary transportation routes. I wouldn't call them just evacuation planning, but transportation routes. Some of those are county and state routes. Some of those are Forest Service routes. So Forest Service can use that map to try to improve some of those ones that aren't maybe up to par today. That would be maybe a secondary or tertiary route out of places like a Black Butte Ranch or a crossroads or a toll gate that are surrounded by federal land and have their primary way out, but it may not be the best way out in the case of a particular emergency. So we've worked with the Sheriff's Office to come up. The Sheriff's Office actually worked with the County Road Department and the fire districts to kind of come up with that map, and we plan to do that as we move around. We're now moving on to the Lapine Community Wildfire Protection Plan. As we move around, essentially we'll be kind of linking that transportation plan, come up with one for a whole county that kind of identifies roads that should be maintained, and people should be aware of which roads those are, so that they can get out of the place that they live and onto kind of a primary transportation route to get them out of an area of emergency. It's a little bit tricky to plan for evacuation during wildfires, because you have to know where the fire is to plan an exact route, but definitely calling out those roads as ones that need to either be maintained or be brought up to a standard so that they could be used for that. It was important and something we incorporated into this plan. So with that, that's kind of a higher level overview of a few of the updates to the plan. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you have. Or
The plan last evening was referred to in the Sisters, our quarterly visioning meeting. So Roger Johnson brought it up, and we were talking about it. But I do find it fascinating that 10-year study showed that 60% of the fires were human-caused. That is,
There's some room for improvement there.
yes, a lot of room for improvements. So, lightning is one thing, but 16, there were very few fires caused by lightning. I mean, it's at the very, very top of that year.
Yeah, very, very few that year.
So, I know, we need to get the word out.
Yeah.
When I see these documents, they're always so informational, kind of grounding. Okay, this is where we live. This is the environment we live in. These are the plans that we could put in place. Personal responsibility in your property. What the federal government is doing. So, as I say, for anybody listening, or for us to maybe even get a little bit more proactive about getting the word out, just to take a look at it. There's a link. It's online. It's available. The new people moving here to Central Oregon. Just flipping through this one time will really put some things in perspective for you.
I was interested in the mechanics of how you do the updating. Do you lead the group? When it says that everybody got together and started working on it in February, but
Yeah.
how do you call a meeting of this? And how do you get people there, and who oversees it?
They've typically been convened and meeting planned by the Project Wildfire Coordinator with direction of myself, and then an overall steering committee, which are essentially the people that sign the document or their representatives. So, for example, City of Sisters, Corey Misley as the city administrator, and then Patrick Davenport as their planning director attended for the city council, who signs it. The mayor signs it. But it's basically that kind of core group that stays in touch and then is coordinated by our Project Wildfire Coordinator. Would be our Boone as our Fire Adapted Communities Coordinator, to kind of make sure those meetings happen and that everybody knows where they're going to be. And
we have
all
one
updates.
You're doing Lapine next, or currently?
Yeah, we are in the process of doing Lapine.
So there's
We
meetings.
started that last year. Yep.
So there's one meeting so far. There's another one scheduled. I'll be attending those meetings also as a Southern Deschutes County resident and commissioner. So we've already seen the Forest Service and Fire Department and city and county, Project Wildfire, all at the table.
What, and then one of the areas that doesn't have a community wildfire protection plan is Bend proper, is that right? The Bend community, or the west side of Bend?
Well, Bend is included in the Greater Bend plan, but it's my understanding in talking to personnel at Bend Fire that the city of Bend may be interested in writing their own plan, and in fact, I think they're discussing that potentially this week, or at whatever the next council.
So would they just write about at their property boundaries, and then we're right next to them writing about the stuff?
That's what I assume. They haven't made that decision entirely yet, so I'm not, I couldn't answer that with any degree of certainty, but my understanding was that they have some interest in other kind of planning and regulatory items that aren't addressed or in we've always approached these as kind of a non-regulatory document, really a planning document, but not anything that commits dollars or regulates anything. And my understanding is that they want to use their plan for those purposes within the city of
Land
Bend.
use or building code or different things like that.
Correct, potentially, yeah.
Because it's interesting, I mean, like when we did the transect, that was kind of identified as city land, or ultimately it was gonna be city land. They've gave it up as that, and now it's county, but it's right adjacent to city land, and
Yeah.
it's interesting.
There's, in the past, and with this document and with Redmond and Lapine, we tried to involve the city and incorporate as many of the text that's relevant for them in the plan as well. But I've usually stopped short of putting goals in as far as, being, putting maps in that might end up being regulatory for a land use purpose or building purposes.
Ed, I'm just wondering about Deschutes River Woods. I know Nathan was working on an evacuation plan that, has that been implemented then?
That's a good question. I couldn't answer that.
I know, I thought he said it was going to be like last July, and I just wondered.
I would suspect that it has, but I couldn't be certain.
So I should talk
on
to
that.
him then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is Deschutes River Woods and then the, like, Tethrow and that area all part of the Greater Bend
Correct.
plan? Okay.
Yeah, generally, it doesn't follow the Deschutes Rural Number 2 Fire District exactly, but it does encompass all of Deschutes Rural Fire District Number 2, which is protected by the Bend Fire Department. It goes beyond that because in some cases, we're trying to identify the wildland-urban interface, including the federal lands, and the district doesn't include some of those federal lands, so we drew it further out than what that district is, but it does include all the locations that are protected by the city of Bend through an agreement with Deschutes Rural Number 2.
Thank you.
Are we the first entity signing?
Yes. City of Sisters has a city council meeting tonight
Oh,
also,
good.
and this is on their agenda.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I'll move board signature document number 2020-055, update to the Greater Sisters Community Wildfire Protection Plan.
And I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Henderson?
I vote yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Commissioner?
Hi, Tom?
Yeah, just perhaps as an add-on item, just yesterday, Ed's finalized the recommended grant awards for that $40,000 that the board made available through the forestry program last year. So I don't know if you want to mention that. We were considering doing a press release just to announce the kind of the results and how that spread out.
We did. Just from memory and round numbers, we had a lot of interest in that. You'll probably recall this is our first time actually putting county dollars out for communities to propose actions for fuel reduction through the grant program. We received 21 applications for a total of $102,500 or so dollars. In the grant application, one of the things I asked the applicant to describe is the match as well, and you may be interested to hear that within those projects, the applicants identified just shy of $245,000 worth of match as well, so lots of engagement in terms of both labor from the residents within the communities as well as, in some cases, cash match from that involved HOA, so the landowner's paying into that, or in one case, actually, a community that included both match from their HOA, labor from their citizens, as well as the citizens paying on a per lot basis to be involved, so showing a significant amount of investment on their part. So for a fairly small investment of the $40,000, a fairly good return in investment in the community in reducing risks. And the projects that were proposed were pretty diverse. So some included treatment of common lands. Some included kind of door-to-door campaigns, including education, but also kind of curbside chipping, and kind of everything in between. There's pretty good geography represented. I mean, there's really all portions of the county. We had, a few from South County, several from Sisters, Bend, and the greater Redmond area, not any within the city of Redmond, but the greater Redmond area. So pretty good representation geographically as well. So lots of interest, and we're getting the word out so that they can plan to then implement those projects this spring. So thank you for that from communities that have passed along their thanks. I pass that along to you, that there's a lot of really appreciative people that this is really spurring some, I think, good projects. And of course, when I get some reports back of what actually got accomplished, I'll bring those back to you so you're aware of
great.
Where-
Yeah, that's why we targeted that money, was to try to get some activities like that going in the heightened fire environment we're in, so that's great.
Yeah.
It's a lot of interest.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent news.
Right.
Well, let's look for opportunities when some of those projects are happening. I mean, if we can, if I can show up during a work day and a community meeting and kind of celebrate the work getting done, we can, really enjoy that. Just explaining to the next person too, how it matters and how if we all work together, we're reducing the risk for ourselves and the community itself.
Exactly, yeah, and we did, look at and encourage projects that included a component of community outreach. So not just that you're going to go do this project, but how are you going to inform the community members? How are you going to get them engaged in, doing a portion of the work that's, that they could do, and really raising the overall awareness of the community was a portion of many of those projects.
Well, and I can imagine in any community, as soon as the activity starts, there'll be people walking out their front door saying, what's going on, that you didn't connect with originally. So, I'd be available to communicate with them during, a work day or two. We'll look for something.
Great.
So I have a question. You said we put up 40,000, but yet the applications went for 102,500. So were you able to meet that?
No.
No. No,
No, we had to reduce the, so, yeah, we had, I asked Oregon Department of Forestry and a couple fire districts to sit in with me and review those applications. We came up with some criteria, including whether, community was organized using like the Firewise model for, they're already organized, so there's a better chance of them being successful. What portion of the project was a match? Did it include the community outreach or not? Was it actually achievable, and what was that community's level of risk? So we evaluated all those, and then essentially tried to rank them, and then had to obviously reduce several of those requests. But yeah. So there's additional opportunity out there for the future, I guess I'd say.
No, I'm just thinking like, okay, so where can we find like some grant to apply for that could help us augment our double our 40 or whatever, Hopefully there's
Yeah,
something out there.
Not
would
having
think.
done this before, didn't have really a good gauge of what kind of requests we get, and so it was a good exercise to go through to kind of see what kind of requests would be out there, and that might inform future grant opportunities in the next year or so.
Well, this was TRT money, right? Wasn't it?
Oh,
Lottery money.
So another option is allocate more of that to this area and less to something else. I mean, that'd be something to think about.
I know. It seems like the match, if they're matching 245,000, that's to 105,000, that would be great.
Sure.
So more money.
if, we could look at the balances in that fund, figure out if there's a way to just kind of do the next project, the one that just fell off the list or whatever, because I'm sure there's another group that would be interested in doing it still.
Sure.
Could you provide a list of the next one or two projects that would have qualified?
Sure, I could.
'Cause, yeah, that'd be just a good exercise, see if we could do it.
Right. Pick up
I
a couple.
guess now that you were talking about it, it'd be nice just to know what we do this discretionary grants for other things. That we just did it yesterday on a bunch of things so it'd be interesting to see what you awarded to what projects and then who wasn't awarded. And we could look at the lottery funds that we have this year, because sometimes there's variance between what we think we're going to get and what we get, so that might be an opportunity also.
Sure.
That's what you're kind of asking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay.
I can get that information to you.
Thank you,
Thank
Ed.
you.
Okay. So, Cody Smith.
Good morning and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Cody Smith, Road Department. The Southwest Canal Boulevard, Southwest Hemholt Way intersection improvement project includes constructing a left turn lane for northbound Southwest Canal Boulevard, modifying the vertical alignment of Southwest Canal Boulevard to improve sight distance at the intersection, removing several fixed roadside objects from the clear zone through that corridor, some sign improvements, intersection lighting, and other work. The project was identified in the Old Bend Redmond Highway Road Safety Audit Report that the road department and their consultant completed back in 2017. The Board of Commissioners has taken several actions on this project here since then, including adopting the preferred alternative, which is the one we're slated to build here, the purchase of the right-of-way, award of the design contract for the project. Road Department solicited for bids for construction of the project in December. Bids were open December 18th, 2019. 5 bids were received. Lowest responsive bid was from High Desert Aggregate and Paving with a total amount of $795,672. So before you this morning is the notice of intent to award for this contract. Approval and issuance of this notice of intent to award will start a 1-week period for interested parties to protest the award. If no protests are received during that period, the contract would then be awarded administratively. The total project cost, so this includes the engineering, right-of-way purchases, some utility work for the project, is $1,008,909 currently. An estimated $672,000 of that cost will be contributed by ODOT through the All Roads Transportation Safety Program. Don't have a schedule from the contractor yet on when the project would start, but assuming the contract's awarded and once we have the contract awarded, the project completion date would be August 31st of 2020.
I recognize this is one of those projects we were talking about in our State of the County and the future projects coming up, and people were, in some of our groups were excited to hear that this improvement was going to be done, so it's good to see it proceeding. A little bit under engineer's estimate.
Right. 15,000 less.
Good.
So that's,
Quite a variation too, $150,000 variation from low to high.
Yeah, we had 5 different bids on this. Fairly good competition here. Yeah, I think some of the bidders on the higher end, due to their resources or other things, the project was probably a little more of a stretch for them. But
okay.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'll move approval of chair signature of document number 2020-052, a notice of intent to award contract for the Southwest Canal Boulevard, Southwest Humboldt's Way Intersection Improvement Project to High Desert Aggregate and Paving Incorporated.
And I'll second it.
any further discussion?
Have we finished the quarry reroute there, or?
the Six Corners intersection improvement project is no longer 6 corners. Yes, that project is completed. With one exception is the intersection lighting, which is actually being completed by Central Electric Cooperative, and I think they're actually working on that as we speak. So, but yeah,
Just further up the road, it's the turnoff to Ridgeview High, or?
It'd be south of Ridgeview High, so that's actually up in the city of Redmond, where you're so just south of that. So Canal Boulevard here gets about 5,000 vehicles per day. Helmholtz gets about 2,500 vehicles per day. So fairly busy intersection just at the south end of Redmond.
No other comments?
More comments, okay. Commissioner Henderson?
I vote yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. And yes, 6 corners. I do think I need to drive over there.
You haven't done it either?
No, I haven't, but I just
haven't
thought
either.
about it,
Now I
and
need
I just
to.
thought, well, when I go to the quarry feed store, then I can drive up there.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Go ahead and get out there, take a look at that. But we're pretty happy with that project. So, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Cody. Happy New Year. Okay, here we are.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Happy New Year. For the record, Peter Gutowski, Deschutes County Planning, joined by Adam Smith, Assistant Legal Counsel, Staff is respectfully requesting the board reinitiate first reading for ordinance 2020-001. It pertains to the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. Adam and I updated the findings after last month's first reading, and we're just being cautious. We are mindful that we have a dedicated or determined opponent, and by having the board redo first reading, it just eliminates any procedural vulnerabilities that could be raised at the Land Use Board of Appeals. So technically, what you have before you is a comprehensive set of findings that reflect the direction you offered in December. So we apologize that this is somewhat redundant, but we're just trying to armor the burden of proof, the process, the procedures, knowing or in anticipation that Central Oregon Land Watch will want to contest this at the Land Use Board of Appeals. Second reading is scheduled for January 22nd, so it's just a couple week delay. So that's why both of us are here and making this respectful request.
Commissioner, excuse me, I would further note, as you recall, there were two, Adam Smith, Assistant Legal Counsel, there were two remaining issues that the board elected or provided staff direction on those two remaining issues. And when we went back and reviewed the findings, we realized we needed to make some changes in the findings to reflect those two changes. Since we were making those changes, we went ahead and bolstered the findings in a couple other key areas. And then since we're, I would characterize they're pretty minimal and they're not really changing the direction or there's nothing individually that's a noteworthy change, but just collectively there were enough changes that it just warranted the recommendation that we redo first reading. Well, yeah, and I don't see a problem with this, just getting it kind of stabilized and landed here and getting it back to a first reading is fine.
So I had, let me see if I can find it in here. I was trying to understand in the ordinance why there's this word strike through that's stricken through repeatedly, and how would you read that then? Language to be deleted in, if you, it looks like you've taken that out, so the sentence doesn't read right, or I'm not quite sure what that means, the strike where it's on every sentence.
You're talking about,
In the,
Commissioner Henderson, just the sections 1 through that go on seem somewhat endlessly into.
yeah, in the ordinance itself, the word strike through is
Yeah.
stricken through, so does that mean it's no longer there, or are you just trying to show what a strike through is?
The latter, yeah.
Just demonstrative.
We're-
It's common practice for
Oh,
all of our ordinances when
Okay.
we're amending code to show the underlining and then show the strike through. It doesn't mean that the word struck through is struck through.
Yeah.
okay.
In this case.
And then the second thing I had was, so this, on packet number 200, title and purpose, we have the definition, and this was the definition that we worked through at the last meeting, right? And this is what this was the final wording we came up with.
Correct.
Okay, and that was, we spent a lot of time discussing that because of this is where someone would poke holes in it as to what's allowed and what isn't allowed, right?
Yeah, the conversation was how comprehensive or permissive does Deschutes County want to, what kind of definition does Deschutes County want to utilize for defining religious institutions and assemblies? And the most all-encompassing, I think, was the approach that the commission supported. There were two other options as well that
Option
were,
1 is the one we
that
said.
were narrower. That's right.
There's another place, I don't know where I find it. There was a question I had about, it said it could be religious or secular, and it was like, well, how does a secular use relate to a religious, to our LUPA? Because do you know where I'm talking about? I can't remember what page it's on.
Yeah, Commissioner, I think you're talking about the additional language in 1888-040. I'm looking at package page 217.
Yes.
Yeah,
And this is just the additional language clarifying our existing authority to adopt conditions of approval. And the reason, so this is applicable to both secular and religious assemblies to ensure compliance with our loop on the equal terms provision, and that's our consistent practice. It's
so you're including the word secular so that we show that we're giving them the same test because it's in the same sentence, in a
Yes.
way, or they,
And again, this is language that we're adding, clarifying our existing authority. And so be it a religious or a secular public assembly that is applying for a land use permit in the wildlife area combining zone, we can adopt conditions of approval that are ensuring the purpose of that wildlife area combining zone are maintained.
so but by including the word secular there and public or private, I guess what I'm wondering is this is really not matching the definition of religious institutions, assemblies. It's kind of I'm wondering, I guess, is this creating a new area where someone could come in and say, well, down here under conditional use is a bed and breakfast inn, you guys have the right to restrict that if you want, so you should, or under a playground, community-owned center. You see what I'm saying? By adding the word secular, are we now creating a new way that people could ask us to regulate things that we really haven't ever used and nobody's brought up that we should use?
I don't know if it's necessarily adding on additional regulatory burden. I think it's relying on the existing provisions in our code to adopt specific conditions of approval. Any condition of approval adopted by the board needs to be tied to something in a code, some kind of concern that we are already regulating. So my understanding, my interpretation of that additional language is it's speaking more to conditions of approval, not adopting in a quasi-judicial proceeding a new regulatory burden that otherwise wasn't codified previously.
And I see what you're saying there, that we're not necessarily creating it. I guess what I'm anticipating is somebody else is gonna create it for us. They're gonna come in and say, you should use this power to not let this stuff happen, and the secular stuff happen in a wildlife combining zone, which we don't really use now, I guess, except for like those massive events, or whatever they're called.
I think, yes, I mean, frequently the commissioners hear testimony, sometimes asking you to deny a use that is allowed by the code, or to condition the use when it's not tied to code criteria. I mean,
Well, again, an example would be, you can have a bed and breakfast inn, somebody comes in and applies for that, and because that's a conditional use that's allowed. But the people that are against it come in and say, well, we're okay with that as long as you only do it 3 months in the summer or 2 months in the winter. In other words, and we'll say, well, we don't really have authority to limit the time that we can have a bed and breakfast inn. And he says, yes, you do. It's right here. It says you can limit any of this stuff. You can time, frequency, seasonality.
Commissioner, the way I interpret the provision in 1888-040 is it gives the county the ability to condition approval for duration, frequency, seasonality, and total number of outdoor assemblies. I see it for the outdoor assemblies being the sensitivity that, the county could contemplate if there was testimony or evidence in the record that showed that there could be wildlife impacts. And
I get what you're saying. It's not, so they couldn't condition whether the bed and breakfast inn is
so you can only operate 3 nights a
whether
week.
they can play volleyball outside every day or something, or,
Right.
yeah, okay.
and that is, Commissioner, precisely what occurred with the Shepherdsfield Church
Yeah,
land use permit. And I do think you would have had the authority to limit secular outdoor events occurring in a bed and breakfast in the wildlife area combining zone for the same reasons you had the authority to limit the total number of events that were occurring with Shepherdsfield Church.
But wasn't that, it was seen as religious, though. Shepherd's Field was, I mean, the activities.
Yes, but I don't think, in terms of the purpose of the wildlife area combining zone, it doesn't matter if those limitations are placed on a religious or a secular public assembly. The commissioners have the authority to place conditions of approval to ensure that the primary purpose of the wildlife area combining zone is maintained.
Well, I get why it's in there for the equal terms part. I worry that we'll create this new thing to wrap around, so, but it's
I
not.
don't know that creating is it. I think it was there implicitly anyway. It would just be maybe pointing a
Yeah, maybe
light on
that's
it or
it, yeah,
something.
maybe that's it.
And we thought it would, this is why I think one of the reasons why we decided to come back, just to insulate ourselves from any kind of procedural challenges. We had, this provision in code, we had, elaborated on how it's incorporated into code based on compliance with Goal 5. So it is, I think it's a genuine amendment that is acknowledging that Deschutes County is in a position to recognize the impacts for outdoor activities, secular or religious. They have that ability, as David noted already, but the fact that it's in the code shows a sensitivity to the testimony that has been provided throughout this process. So, I elaborated on that provision to the extent that it bolsters our arguments for, how we're trying to comply with Goal 5.
The additional language, it's the history, this additional language was recommended by staff to the Planning Commission in reaction to the Planning Commission's, I would say, concerns. They had a lot more public testimony that was, they had a lot more public testimony, period. A fair amount of that public testimony was in support of these proposed amendments, but there was a fair amount of that public testimony that was opposed. And there were several questions from the planning commissioners that were suggesting that these changes would allow churches carte blanche with zero limitation in the wildlife area combining zone. And we reiterated on several occasions, no, they still have to go through the same permitting process. It doesn't mean that there are no limits that can be placed. It doesn't mean that we can address these issues. So we had developed that language at that time to try and address those concerns that these changes would allow churches carte blanche. It really, again, to reiterate, I believe it's codifying existing authority. I don't believe it's a new grant of authority. I don't think it's changing anything. It's just being, it's making the express authority that the county already has very clear.
Well, I'm supportive of the doing a first reading, so should I make a motion to do that? Do you have any comments, Commissioner? Do either of you have any?
I support it.
And I would suggest first reading by title only.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'll move approval of first reading by title only of ordinance number 2020-001, Religious Land Use Institutionalized Persons Act.
And
All
I'll
right.
second it.
Any further discussion?
Is this anticipated to be appealed then? Is that you're thinking it's likely to be appealed?
Yes,
by the
I would
Land Use Board of
anticipate it to be appealed.
Well, I'll say my grounds for support, one is that I don't think it's going to be a widely used change. I don't think we're going to all of a sudden have a lot of churches or religious institutions wanting to be out in rural areas. Number two, I think because of our LUPA, they clarify something that's been clarified, I think, throughout history, is the importance of churches being treated equally, and so that's my support for it, so.
Okay. Commissioner Henderson?
I vote yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Okay, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Just
Thank you.
read it
So
first.
she does the
Oh,
first
sorry.
reading.
So I
only-
read this part right here?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to read an ordinance amending Deschutes County Code Title 18, Deschutes County Zoning Title 19, Bend Urban Area Zoning Ordinance, and Title 23, the Deschutes County Comprehensive Plan, to ensure equal treatment of religious institutions per the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act of 2000.
Thank you,
Is
Commissioner.
that it? Thank you.
Thank you for being so careful.
other items?
Yes, we need to go to other items. I believe we're looking at our letter for the DEQ.
Yeah. So Dave drafted this up, and have you each had a chance to look at it?
Yes.
Did you get a chance to look at the stuff sent by the commissioner? Who was it? Paul Enders, wasn't it?
Well, Paul sent it, but also it came from, originally, didn't it come from Polk County? The
Maybe-
original letter
maybe,
came
yeah,
from them.
yeah.
Yes, from Craig Polk.
So what are your thoughts?
Well, so, I'm seeing the letter and understanding that the statement we're making here. I did not know before yesterday when it was mentioned, though, so, I mean, this is coming on quick. But, yeah, I mean, if these statements are, responding to what's going on in DEQ, I do support that.
It's a serious issue.
Yeah.
Designating all the water. Yes, I would be willing and more than able to sign this letter.
I asked Dave briefly about it, and I think Tom too, that did we know this was going on, or were we left out of the process? Because it seemed like the commissioners in Ontario felt like that it would all come as a surprise. And it seems like, would you say, Tom, that Chris had been tracking it, but I don't know what that meant.
Well, Chris is heavily involved in the OASIS group, the State Association of Road Directors. So they had some discussions of it. I found out yesterday. According to Chris, it's less impactful potentially of a rule change on this side of the mountains where there's far less water, less waterways. But nevertheless, as a group, the OASIS felt that it was premature for DEQ to make this designation without essentially properly vetting it. So their group submitted a letter. But up until yesterday, I wasn't aware of the issue or that Chris had been tangentially involved in it.
Well, I kind of would like to put in a third paragraph. I like what Dave has come up with. I'd kind of like to have something after the first two paragraphs talking about, disappointed that we weren't involved in this, or, I mean, it seemed like we didn't know anything about it, and it seemed like other commissioners, from what we gathered, other commissioners didn't know anything from what. So I'd like some kind of wording around that. I don't know what it would be. And the other thing I was thinking about, Commissioner DeBone, is remember when we went to that DEQ open house and Director Whitman was all, he wants to work for all of us and he wants an open process. And I was thinking we could refer to that somehow, that, it was only 2 years ago that we, went to an open house for DEQ here in Central Oregon. And we thought one of your chief goals was to make sure you're paying attention to local needs or whatever, something along those lines. And this seems
Some of the commissioners,
this seems inconsistent with that or something.
Environmental Quality Commission folks were in the room too.
Yeah. So so something like that would be kind of, I think, personalized for us, that because we'd gone to that. And so do you want to try to get those two concepts, and
Certainly, I can throw something together, and
I can help you with it in terms of,
we're disappointed that
that.
DEQ failed to reach out directly to county governing bodies, especially in light of your previous representation to us to operate a more transparent and open
yeah,
agency,
yeah.
something along those lines.
And you could say the commitment of you and the commission members we met or something, because it was a nice reception. I mean, we actually got to talk to him quite a bit. That was, I remember it.
Let me read a little bit of this just verbally so people that might be watching understand what we're talking about here. So a DEQ's decision to list water bodies throughout the state as water quality impaired without data to support these listings. In order to be scientifically defensible, decisions to list water bodies as impaired, and this is our statement now, must be based on water body-specific data and cannot be extrapolated from samples from neighboring waterways or tributaries. So just for people watching, understanding the topic.
Good.
Well, and the really troubling thing is they want to list agricultural irrigation, drainage ditches, and other man-made intermittent drainage ditches. I mean, this could be incredibly impactful.
Yeah. Okay, So, yeah, we can come up with a different version of it, a little bit more. Another paragraph is proposed. I support that.
And I support that also.
Did anybody have any thoughts from the fact that the deadline was a couple days ago, and why did Chris have any comments about why there hadn't been more time to, I mean, we're coming in late, but, and maybe we should mention that in the letter, but I don't know that we're coming in
Well, our
as soon as
letter's
we knew
already
about it.
coming in late, so.
But should we mention the fact it's coming in late because we didn't even know it was coming? What Chris would say about that, anything?
Maybe we should
We
make
can
a phone
acknowledge
call
there was a,
to them and just say, you know, it was the holidays.
we understand there was an open record period that
Yes.
closed at some date.
Yes. And
But here's our
letter is
statement.
coming. Our letter is coming.
We're sure you'd like to hear our
Yes, you
point of
want to
view.
hear our opinion.
Okay, good.
So you personally met him? Did you,
Yeah,
do you want to
he-
call him? And you want to be the person that calls him?
I don't feel very informed is the only.
Yeah, well, that's exactly where I'm at too. You know, this
I
is
mean, I wouldn't mind
coming from other
calling him.
commissioners saying that this is a hot issue that hadn't really bubbled up in our county, but now that we're hearing about it, we do want to comment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not afraid to call him once I'm informed. There was one of the emails I got actually had their decision or something, but I actually didn't print that out. I printed out the 3 letters from AOC, OASs, and, okay.
All right. So we have a
Good.
decision. So,
Good.
is there any other items?
Commissioners, we had the League of Women Voters proclamation that we brought up yesterday, and whether you'd entertain that for February.
Oh, gosh.
I have an extra copy if you
So the decision is if we're going to put it on our agenda.
Yeah, just a bit of background that, as you know, the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote, the 100-year anniversary is in 2020, in August. County Clerk Nancy Blankenship is planning some celebratory events associated with that anniversary. Separate from that, somewhat related, the League of Women Voters also has their 100-year anniversary next month in February of 2020. And they've asked if the board would be willing to entertain a separate proclamation celebrating that particular anniversary.
So what I would propose is that we just look at the words, make sure it reads the way we want it to read, but then, aim at doing that, putting it on our schedule.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Who came up with the words for this draft?
This came from, my understanding, their national organization that was distributed down through the state to locally. We just simply inserted some Deschutes County specific wording into it.
as I say, it can be edited locally also.
Yeah. So I'd be in favor of looking at that aspect of it in terms of making it comply, I guess, pair with what we see of it here locally, given some research we did yesterday, so. When are they wanting a proclamation?
Next month in February is their request, which is their actual 100-year anniversary.
Yeah. Well, I'm very supportive of what's been done for women voters and suffrage and that, so.
It's only been 100 years.
Only 100.
Well, no, I remind my granddaughter, when you look at the history of our
Yeah.
country, and you go, women have only been voting for 100 years. And not all women 100 years ago wanted to vote. So,
Well, remember, almost 250 years ago, we didn't have Republican forms of government even, where anybody voted.
yes,
There were kings and queens, and so the whole thing's pretty new.
yes, we are a very young country.
All right. So we can work on that at a work session?
Okay?
Great. Do you have anything additional?
I was just just as an FYI, the board had asked during our discussion yesterday on the legislative priorities and a letter to be drafted by Jeff Hall and modified by us. Jeff's been in meetings all yesterday afternoon and this morning. He's working on it as quickly as he can with Whitney. We should have a letter for you in the next day or so for you to look at and modify you'd like and be able to take with you to Salem next week.
Okay, good.
Excellent.
Two or three judges.
Yes.
We'll just round up to three now.
Well, that's my way. That's the way I think. It's like why ask for one when you really almost need three? So, wonderful. Okay, that sounds great then. I'm glad they're going to
Yeah.
come through with that. Eric, did you have anything? I don't. Does our legal have anything, Dave?
Nothing else.
Okay.
I had one update. We talked a little bit about the, what road district is it? Forest? What's the one? Fall River
Fall River.
Road District. Had a conversation with the current chair, and he did invite us out to, we have a meeting next week on the 14th, if any or all of us want to go to that at 11:30, the Sun River Library, and then also an invitation to look, go to the neighborhood. And I said I was going to try to do that day, at least the visit. And then he brought up I guess, an ethics opinion that's been issued and a district attorney's opinion. I don't know if you have copies of both those.
Yeah, those have been forwarded to you.
Have they? Okay.
Re-forward them.
Well, did we get them last week or?
Yes, last week.
Okay, so maybe to look at those. But I would like to go out there before I make a further decision. That's what my plan would be.
Okay, so you're saying January 14th, there's a meeting?
Yeah, at 11:30 at the Sun River Library. That's of the special road district. If he just invited us if we wanted to come.
So I spoke to Mr. Swanson yesterday. He was interested to see the DA's paragraphs on the request for charges or whatever, so I did forward that to him, and I communicated with John Hummel himself on that topic. In fact, yeah, right before the Public Safety Coordinating Council yesterday, so,
Oh, yeah.
hey, we got a topic. And, so he understands that Mr. Swanson has that in his hands also.
Okay, yeah, and he called me after talking to you. I think you'd referred him to me, so, good.
Great. So,
Is-
did you have any further business?
Just, I was on the radio down on the Pine this morning, so KNCP, local radio, two guys, radio show about 45 minutes, and they were pretty well prepared, just asking about, Terrebonne and marijuana and budget and the whole deal, so real good show this morning.
Okay.
And I was on the radio at KBND. this
There you
morning,
go.
So, but only for 10 minutes. So, yeah, it was good.
I wasn't on any radios.
But he said he got a quote from you yesterday.
Well,
or
yes,
talking-
I did call him yesterday.
Yeah, in fact, I almost called, and I figured maybe one of you had, and then we went to our Public Safety Coordinating Council, so I didn't get to call him back, so I'm glad you were able to.
Yes, so, okay, great. All right, so the meeting is therefore adjourned.
Okay.
We're good?